generally not the preachy type. That's just not my nature. But there's another very good reason why I don't think anyone should be the preaching type. People's beliefs are oftentimes very, very important to them. They sort of form the glue of their being, and without them they might fall apart. This is certainly true of religious beliefs and true of many others. Above all, in this context, the beliefs that men specifically hold about their own feelings and their own place in the world with respect to themselves, other men and women, well, those are about as sacred as you can get oftentimes. And there's a simple reason for this. It's because it's instinct. It's innate, these desires. And then more often than not, what happens is a post hoc justification for the set of beliefs that occurs, and it's used to safeguard this system of belief. Now, specifically with respect to the red pill or manosphere ideas, I don't think being preachy and trying to convert people ever works. And there are good reasons for this. The reasons I've cited already, that beliefs, if they're important to somebody, tend to be the glue that keep them together. But also that point that Morpheus makes in The Matrix, and I know it's a bit hackneyed by now to constantly refer to The Matrix, but yes, it's true. People who don't want out of the Matrix will fight you tooth and nail to stay in the Matrix. So there's not much point in talking to these people in this regard, at least very forcefully. However, I do believe in talking to people. I believe in talking to men about the beliefs about themselves and their place in the world. What I might want to call it is slow drip awakening. What do I mean by that? Well, it just so happens that recently I was in a longer conversation with a certain gentleman, and after a while the topics switched, and he mentioned that he was feeling a bit down and out because of the relationship that he previously had. But I got the sense that he was feeling lonely. That might be the right word to describe it. He didn't use that word outright, because I think men typically wouldn't use that type of language if they're feeling it. But he did make that point more or less. And he was saying to me how he missed his ex and what have you. And again, I'm not one to preach, nor am I one to prod, but I did start asking some questions. And I suppose a normal person or a normie would just say something to the effect of, "Oh, that sucks, man. Sorry to hear." And I did say that. But I also asked the very critical question, what is it that you miss about that relationship? And we were only in a voice context, so I couldn't see his face, but I suspect that he was taken back by that question. Because that's not a typical question a lot of men get. Not a typical question anyone really gets. Asking what it was about the relationship that they purportedly miss that animates them to the sense of loss or feeling alone. And I suppose he thought about it for a while. But after thinking about it, he couldn't really give me a concrete answer. And he seemed really perplexed. It was puzzling to him. Because when I asked him again in a somewhat different way, well, you say you miss this relationship and the female. What exactly about the relationship, about the female? What did she do for you that made you miss her and makes you miss her even now? And still, nothing. And this happens quite frequently. This isn't the first time I've used this technique in conversing with men. Because what we often reminisce about, in life in general, are phantasms of the past, things that don't have real substance. Nostalgia, we call it frequently. Optimizing scenes that were never optimized to begin with, that had fissures and cracks and just weren't perfect at all, far from it. And of course, putting on rose-tinted glasses to view the past. Because functionally we live in the present, and the past is a distant memory. And try as we might, we don't actually remember the past particularly well, most of us at least. So he couldn't come up with a good reason. And I asked further questions about the relationship. And he had realized, actually, that they used to fight a lot, he and his ex-girlfriend. And they fought very frequently, maybe not constantly. It was one of the sore points of the relationship for both of them. And I asked him, do you think there was anything good about the relationship that really stands out even now? And as it turned out, it seemed, by his own account, that it was pretty generic. The usual, yeah, the sex was okay, and they would hang out. And so what I gradually brought him around to was the idea that he didn't miss the person in question, nor did he really miss the relationship. He missed, in theory, the idea of having a body around. And this concept of having a body around was then embellished upon in his own mind, wrought by nostalgia to be that way. And he thought of the relationship in a fond way that he might not have at the time. Matter of fact, he probably would be in a bad state of mind because they were fighting so frequently. And I asked him another question. I said, do you think that the relationship you had was primarily stress or stress relief? It's always a good metric. It's my own personal metric when I look back at the past. And he said, well, actually, it was more stressful than anything else. And then I asked him, what about previous relationships? And he had 2 before that. And he said, yeah, they were kind of the same thing. But then I asked him other questions, such as, what about your friends? What are their relationships like? And the only thing he could come up with respect to his friends' relationships was that it was probably pretty similar. The only time, in fact, he heard about his friends complaining about the relationships they had was when they were fighting or the female in question was giving him shit. And it was at that point in time that I think he had an aha moment. Not a huge one, but a minor one. He began to realize that he wasn't sure why he had been in relationships or why his friends are. And he began to realize above all that it really was instinct pulling him in a certain direction. You see, people don't like to hear this, but men and women don't get along very well. Men and women don't really like each other very much. They're pulled together, drawn together by the forces of nature. And hormones, running off the charts, typically hold them together for long enough so as to produce a pleasurable feeling, a sense of belonging, a sense of, oh yes, this is very important to me. But the substance behind it is paper thin. And despite all the hormonal highs he might have experienced, he was beginning to realize slowly, through subtle questions, that the substance of his relationships was paper thin too. And this revelation, I think, really took him back a little bit. He said, I never really thought about it that way. And this speaks to this fundamental truth that men are so ensconced in their own instincts half the time, they don't even question why they're doing certain things. And that's above all true with women. They don't think about, is this relationship good for me? Is this what I want? Is this what I need? Is this causing me undue stress? Is this relationship a burden to me? They don't do that sort of thing because it's just a given. All you're supposed to do is pursue relationships and eventually marriage and then rinse and repeat. And I did ask a few other questions, why he thought other men pursue relationships. And these were things he just never really thought about. We typically don't question our instincts. Sometimes instincts can be conflated with urges. We don't pose the question as to why we have to take a dump or why we have to take a piss. They all need to do that eventually. But the other things that are more extensions of complex desires don't fit that mold as easily. They're not as translatable to you have to do it or you don't have to do it. And doubt is the starting point of virtually any belief or new belief system. The idea that you're supposed to go through the rigmarole and rinse and repeat again and again and again simply because your instincts are telling you for some stale sex and many, many heated arguments and the stress that accompanies that sort of thing, that's not something you have to do as a man. Now, if you're a long-time subscriber, or you've been going your own way for a long time, that's not a revelation. That's pretty obvious. But the vast, vast majority of men are still in that headspace. They're still exactly where you were at some point in time, going through those motions, thinking about, why am I doing this again? Without an answer to that question. So really the most effective tool one has when trying to bring about male self-awareness is this slow drip method, in my experience. Asking questions, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle, but never outright countering what they want to say or believe. Just allowing themselves on their own terms to discover certain things. Now, I've only talked to this particular gentleman a few times. I have no idea whether or not it's going to have a lasting impact on him. It's possible, especially when the tiny cracks and fissures start to emerge. But in general, that's what happens when men become self-aware of their instincts at the deepest level. It's something brought about not by you, the person talking to them, but by their own internal revelation, their own internal realization of their place in the world and what's been happening in their lives. You can help them in that process. You can spur it along, but you can't do much more than that. And if you come down too hard on them, you're going to get opposition. We know this all from experience, because most people aren't ready to, quote unquote, leave the matrix, in this case, give up their beliefs, give up what's core to them, what they believe is core to them. Anyway, gentlemen, I hope you're taking care in this disgustingly hot summer weather. As always, may the gods watch over you, and if I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. You take care, and bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.